Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sales TV Live. And I'm joined by my good friend Paul King from Salesforce here. And we're going to talk about all sorts of things to do with sales performance management and what how we measure the figures and real-time data and how we get the best out of our sales teams and how we understand what's working and what isn't, and a whole host of other things that I'm sure we won't have time to complete talking about today. But welcome, Paul, and a happy new year to you. And please introduce yourself to everybody.
Yes, thanks for inviting me on, Adam. So I'm Paul King. I specialise in sales operations, and I've worked for the last 25 years in all sorts of different sales support functions, be it sort of sales operation directly or partner roles, or sales specialist roles, that sort of stuff. So currently at Salesforce, I have been at Microsoft in the past as well. And actually, I started my career working for a small consultancy back in the day, where that was kind of my first taste of operations management. And I was a fee earning consultant for a few years, and then managed to get into the sales operations of that team when it was just 100 consultants. And my career has taken off from there into this specialized role, which I know, I think when we spoke about this, you were saying that I'm probably the first person that you've interviewed like this in this kind of sales operations role. So yeah, hopefully something a bit different to talk about today.
Yeah, and you know, when we were riffing beforehand and when we spoke before Christmas, there's like so much stuff that we can cover here. But I think we both had a couple of things that we wanted to go over, and certainly when we were talking last time, we sort of settled on or stumbled upon that paradox of the benefit and simultaneously the problem of real-time stats on sales performance. And you highlighted a really interesting issue which comes to light as a result of having this real-time data. So explain that again to me, just to be sure that I've got it clear.
Yeah, well, I guess so. The story is, when I started in this kind of role earlier on in my career, there weren't all these CRM systems around. Like, we were using spreadsheets and whiteboards to do our forecasting and that kind of stuff. And it's obviously evolved massively over the last few years. And I have to say that, given I work at Salesforce, great CRM system. Obviously, everyone needs to go buy that.
It's not the market leader for nothing, is it?
That's right. I think from what we were discussing was, I guess, around accountability, right? And how that constant availability of data, that constant ability for sales leaders to reach in, have a look at exactly what's going on with the business, has had an impact, I think, on behavior and sales behavior, both from a sales leader perspective and an account manager perspective. Because there feels like, from an account exec perspective, there feels like constant pressure, constant inspection, because it's available all day, every day to everyone who's got access to that data. But from a sales leader point of view as well, I think I was saying to you before Christmas, it's like watching your kids grow. You know, when you see them every day, it doesn't feel like they grow. But then when, you know, the great aunt visits them once a year, and they're like, wow, it's gone up a huge amount. And I think it's kind of that with CRM. Like, you don't see some of the changes that are happening, but if you take a step back and look for over a 6-month or an annual timeline, that's when you actually see the bigger change. And I think part of what I do at the moment is to try and, whilst I've got access to all of that data, right, and that's part of my job, is to create those reports and create that analysis. I think part of my job at the moment, what I'm seeing is that we have to then, I have to encourage the sales leaders to then take a step back and actually see that bigger picture of what's changing over time. And we just didn't have access to that 20 years ago, 15 years ago. You know, when someone wrote up on the whiteboard that was what they were going to hit for the quarter, that's kind of what you just wrote that down in your notebook and kept coming back to that. And there wasn't really anything else around it, right? So that we held those sales managers to account at that time against that number that you sort of jotted down in your notebook.
Yeah, and I guess that nowadays, I've told you that I'm going to do $1 million this month, and then when we speak tomorrow, and I say I'm only going to do 980,000, you go, yeah, it's only 0.2%. Who cares? It's not a big deal, really. But 0.2% today, and then the same tomorrow, and the same the day after, and this gradual whittling back of those numbers, you add it. It's like if you turn your back and I steal one of your French fries, isn't it? You don't notice I've stolen one of your French fries. If I steal 50 of your French fries, you do notice it.
Right. And I think the other thing that's happening with here is that we have the ability to have so much data, and we can slice and dice it in all sorts of different ways. There are so many different angles that people come at it from, and quite rightly so. I mean, especially in a complex business like where I kind of specialize in that enterprise sales sort of SaaS area. It is complex, right? And everyone's looking at different product SKUs, or marketing are coming in and looking at kind of leads and events and impact from that point of view. And everyone cuts that data in so many different ways that you can just end up in tons and tons of meetings talking about that data and struggle to kind of see that bigger picture of what impact you're actually making on the business. And I think the final thing around that is, I think what I've noticed over the last few years is those things that you set up as the KPIs of the business that you want to be able to see is kind of the reflection of how well the business is doing, is now unfortunately kind of, we're almost putting the cart before the horse, because we're, rather than those sort of reflecting on the health of the business, we're now setting those as targets. So people are chasing those targets, and we're kind of going down those rabbit holes within the data to make sure that the business looks right. But actually that cart before the horse thing is sometimes that you don't actually then see that growth that you're expecting to see. You're kind of fixing the KPIs, but not actually doing that. The KPIs are not now the leading indicator or the indicator that they once were, because you're now trying to chase them down, and it's not having the impact that you want to have.
Well, I think the other thing is that often the KPIs, you can either set the KPIs because you think they make a difference to the performance, or you can set the KPIs because they're KPIs that can easily be drawn from the system. And that's one of the issues, isn't it? It's like, we've got $1 million in pipeline currently today, which is 5 times coverage on my number, which is exactly what you expect me to do. But actually, the key thing is, are you actually going to close any of that business? Well, no, I've been busy building this pipeline because that's what I'm measured on.
Right.
And I think that many times, this is easy to draw out of the system. Therefore, I'll report this because it's a comfortable metric, I guess, or it's a comfortable thing to be able to show.
That's right. And I think you need that strong leadership then to say, well, let's put those ones aside. We might have access to those, but we can keep an eye on them. But actually, these are the ones that are going to make a difference. And let's keep coming back to those same ones. Because it's like that, going back to that whiteboard figure, you kind of need that clear whiteboard figure that someone's written down in the notebook to say, that's what we're going to hit. That's what you need to keep going back to. And I think to your point, there's that erosion of it just chips away over time. But I think also we just can get that bamboozled with all of these other KPIs that we go and fix, and then we come back and find out that that thing that we wrote on the whiteboard, and that one that we really need to commit to, we've kind of lost sight of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another thing is that I looking at the questions that we had kind of discussed ahead of the session today, I remember that when I was at Oracle, I worked with a sales guy that was actually he's the best salesperson I have ever had the privilege of being in the same room with. And he's one of those people that kind of is a super overachiever of things. And when we were dividing up the territories that we were selling our product into, he was the one that got Middle East, Africa, Russia, and basically, this was what I had considered to be a truly dreadful territory, and there was no way he was going to sell anything at all. he was, of course, the person that carried the rest of the team on his back because he was a really good salesman, and he saw the opportunity within those territories. So one of the questions is that if a sales rep does not achieve their objectives, how do we know whether it's because the salesperson isn't very good and they need training or help or support or to be managed out of the business, or whether or not it's just a territory or a vertical that has no buyers in it?
Yeah. I think it's a really hard question to solve, but I think there's probably two bits that you can do around this. One is what you need to do in the moment, but probably the bigger side of it, and the bit I'm passionate about, is that there's an annual cycle that you need to go through around the planning, and I always advocate for that to start much earlier than most people think it should start. There's especially in a complex environment like this with all sorts of products. And all sorts of different sales lead times that you need to start planning pretty early to get some of this stuff right. And I think if you do that planning and you size the territory and you segment the customers correctly, and that you also have an open negotiation with the sales leaders. I actually used to, I know most people hate this, but I used to love the negotiation of the quotas and the quota setting. Because I got to have that conversation with all of the sales leaders to say, well, from what I can see, this is the sort of growth that we should be looking at. And of course, everyone would come back and say, no, I can't possibly do that. But my target in quota setting was to make sure that everyone was equally unhappy. So we didn't have anyone who was going out the room saying, yeah, I've got an easy one, or people who were just like, this is ridiculous, I'm going to go and resign and go somewhere else. But you got to even it out, and you got to give everyone, I think, an equal challenge, right? But if you haven't got that right, then you start to get into those problems of, well, I don't really know if it's the territory is wrong or whether there's a capability problem. And I think if you do more planning and a lot more work around, where are we strategically going? Are our customers segmented correctly? Are the territories cut and carved in the right way that it's a fair challenge for each of those salespeople? Then you can be much more confident that if there are performance issues, that you can maybe have a look at the territory again. But there's probably more reliance on the AE executing against that quota than just not putting enough time and effort into the planning, and then you end up in difficult conversations, especially once that person signed up to that quota and got going, and it's 3, 4, 6 months down the line. It's a bit late then to kind of start saying, well, that's a bad territory. So you need that upfront discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So I'm just interested to know what happens when, when I say you, I mean the management team rather than you personally. What happens when you get it really badly wrong? So what happens if 2 months in I'm at 600% of my number, and the stuff isn't even really starting to come in yet, and you're just like, oh my God, we're going to be bankrupt paying this guy's. So how do you reconcile that equally with the guy that's you can see they're working flat out and they're simply getting nowhere?
Yeah, well, I think I certainly advocate for our sales leaders to hold their A's to account in a very structured way, and the way that I actually learned this off a book. Mike Weinberg, I think his name is, Sales Management Simplified, and within that there's a really good chapter around holding your A's to account. He advocates for like a very short meeting where you just really look at 3 things, and the first one is hitting a number, basically being responsible for hitting your number. And actually, if they've hit the number for the month, the quarter, whatever you're looking at, kind of the meeting's over. It could be like a 2-minute meeting. The next thing you would look at, though, if you've missed or forecast against something and missed that forecast, is then you'd have a deep dive on pipeline. And this is not going into coaching, as what he was quite clear about in the book. It's not an avenue to then go off and coach and give advice. And it's really to look at, do you have enough to cover the gap, get back on track, to hit your numbers in the next month, the next quarter, whatever you're looking at. And again, if that's a no, then you start to look at activity, and looking at, who are they meeting, where are they going, what sort of prep are they doing, what are their campaigns that they're running, all that kind of stuff around the activity. And I think if you hold to those three, I mean, it sounds really simple, and it is really simple, but it's not necessarily simple to do, and people can be quite reticent about having those kind of accountability meetings. But if you do that and you hold people to account, and it's based on a good amount of thinking that you've put into the territory design and the targets that you've got, you should be able to hold people to account to hit those goals. I definitely advocate for that, because I think we definitely, especially again in these sort of complex areas where you can hit your number in all sorts of different ways, and you've got long sales lead times, you can get very wrapped up into, well, this person did this really well but still didn't quite hit their number on that, or actually they've driven a lot of pipe gen this year and it's going to be another year till they hit it, and all those sorts of things. But that's where I think really the planning comes in, of let's be really clear about the vision for that territory, what number you're going to be able to hit, where that's going to come from, and have that conversation up front early, rather than just kind of landing someone in a patch and saying, good luck, and then you get the arguments coming back.
Yeah, and I think that Patrick's comment here about the activities, focus on the activities that drive the outcome that you want. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that and I say salespeople, this is true of all of us, we're very good at playing the game that's put in front of us.
Yeah.
So the challenge with pipeline is that actually how much of it is real pipeline. So Tim often tells a story about when he was working at Oracle. Tim, my business partner, that is, when he was working at Oracle, he said that they were having a deal review, and somebody said, "Yeah, I'm confident that this is going to close this quarter." And Tim said, "How many people in that account are you connected to on LinkedIn?" And the person's like, "One, the decision maker." Tim's like, "That's not going to happen," and it didn't happen, of course, for whatever reason. But so much of this is like, I can fill out the CRM and it can be a tapestry of lies, because that's the next layer of stuff. If I don't hit my number, well, I'll make it up in the CRM. So how do we differentiate between fact and fiction in terms of what you're putting into your CRM?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's where that single meeting really helps, because you start with, are you hitting your targets? and I think we need to be really clear in our line of work that we are here to go and get that revenue for the business. It's unlike other areas of the business, sales is simple in that respect.
It's very fine.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we shouldn't be scared of the fact that if it's a fair quota and a fair territory, that we should be holding people to account to hit a number, and if you're not, then you need to do something about it. But it's and there's, I think the other part of that is, by doing that planning, that pre-work, you're ensuring that you as a company have set those people up for success, because that's a critical part of it, right? Is that we're not going to throw someone into a territory and give them a quota when they can't do that. And I think that's by doing that preparation as an organization and thinking that through, you're then setting them up for success. Otherwise, it's not fair, is it? And also you'll create that gap between the organization and the salesperson, and you want that to be a much more collaborative, especially again in complex sales, where they are going to need to be, effectively the CEO of their territory, and even though they might be an individual contributor, they're going to have to go and be a leader and create like a little V team with the level of support that they will need, whether it's from BDR resources or marketing or specialists. They're going to have to go and get that. So you need them on side, you need them bought in, you need them motivated with something that they feel that they can go after and go and hit.
Yeah, I think I've heard the expression before. It needs to be out of reach, but not out of sight.
That's right.
It needs to be a stretch, doesn't it? But it needs to be something that you think there is some chance of you hitting.
That's a much better way of describing it than equally unhappy.
I think the reality is that for many people it is that, though, isn't it? It's like we're none of us going to get the easy ride that we'd hope for. So one of the questions that you wanted to touch on, I think, is how should sales leaders rethink performance measurement in 2026? And I guess that to a certain extent we're like the joke, guys driving through an unfamiliar town. And he winds down the window and he says, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Main Street?" And the person says, "Well, I wouldn't start from here if I were you." So, we've got all of these performance metrics that are a given. Why do we measure this? Why am I holding you to account for this particular thing? And the answer is, well, because that's just how we do it, or that's how we've always done it. So what should people be doing different? And I think, again, back to Patrick's point, this is about focusing on the activities and measuring the things that we genuinely believe are going to drive success, rather than things that, well, you had to make 100 cold calls a day. Well, sorry, I had to make 100 calls, so now you're going to have to do it. And that kind of almost like a bullying behavior of some of these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're in the situation now, particularly with the amount that AI is going to impact sales. I think there's all sorts of things that are coming already out there. There are SDR style apps that are already out there where someone goes on a website and clicks a button and the AI will instantly call them back and help qualify. So there's all sorts of different tools, and I think AI is going to impact our sector quite significantly. But I think at the end of the day, and again in kind of enterprise sales, people still buy from people, and we need to use AI in a sensible way so that we can be more productive as sellers, but also to help us create that personal connection. We can't sit behind a computer screen and use AI to do the work for us. We actually need the AI to kind of lift us up and create that connection. And that's certainly something that I think, particularly like post-COVID, there's a lot of home working and everything else that goes on in video calls, but actually there's still something to be said about having the boots on the ground, getting into the customer site, meeting them face to face, and creating that personal connection. I think obviously you're a big advocate of that as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting actually, because I find I've very much got a dichotomy in terms of how I feel about AI. So it does provide incredible opportunities for streamlining and speeding up processes and that side of things. However, it's in everybody's psyche to be as lazy as they possibly can be to get the result to get, and that's a reflection of human nature rather than any people in specifically. So we're seeing AI develop in leaps and bounds on an almost daily basis, and I have very recently started to play with Notebook LM, so Google's kind of tool that does that. And what's really interesting about this is that yesterday I was having a play with this, and Notebook LM created me an absolutely fantastic infographic, an absolutely fantastic video, and some absolutely fantastic other content, so like show cards and slide deck and stuff like this. And the reason it did that is that I began the conversation with it by pouring in over 100 of the blogs that I'd written, things that I had invested a huge amount of time in thinking about and putting into it, and the resources for that, such as 6 Sense reports, Gartner reports, Forrester reports. So it had not just a view of fact, the output from these reports, however you choose to present that, but also my thinking. So then I showed it to my wife in the evening, said, "Look at this, this is remarkable," and played the video, and it's an American accent, but it was like, she said, "Wow, it's your words. It's as if you're speaking this." And my point is that the challenge is that most people don't have the 100 bits of content to put in there. Yeah. So it's like you said a moment ago, people buy people. Absolutely. So actually what you want is you want to differentiate yourself from everybody else in the marketplace. And you can't do that by just typing into ChatGPT or whatever, write me a blog about, because it'll access exactly the same stuff that it does for when you do it, when he does it, when she does it.
Yeah.
So you have to do that pre-work.
Yeah.
And I think that the challenge here is that that's the bitter pill that most people don't want to take, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
They want the shortcut now.
Yeah. Well, and we've certainly been playing with a lot of these things in our team. Notebook LM is great because you can actually go and research on the internet of that organization's strategy or their annual report or whatever it might be, feed it in with your content of your use cases in that industry or something, and actually get it to map it together, which you could have done, and it might have taken hours for you to do, and it can do it in 15 minutes and give you some sort of output. And I think we need to use those sort of tools really well in our area of the business. I did hear that you should kind of treat AI a bit like an intern. That they can
very clever, but doesn't know anything.
Well, yeah, and exactly. So it might do an amazing amount of research if you give it enough context, enough guidelines. But it also might get it like horribly wrong, and I think that's a good thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind when using these things. I think the other side of it is the customer side, right? I mean, they're using it as much as we're using it. They will be typing into AI, which provider would be the best for me based on this. They're gonna use it to become a lot more educated as well. So again, kind of the stuff that you advocate for, of like building your network, creating those personal connections. You want to be that person that someone calls up and say, hey, I've been doing that research. I've learned about this, that, and the other, but I still need someone to kind of take me through the solution and understand exactly how I could do this. You want to be that person rather than kind of spamming people on LinkedIn trying to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely. Spam, cold is cold. Doesn't matter how you do it. So we are approaching the end of the time. You wanted to talk briefly about personality types, didn't you?
Well, I just wanted to. I mean, it was something when you said in December that this would probably be the first time you've spoken to someone in this kind of role, and it just made me think about the personality types, because I've always been told through my career that I think differently, and I think that's probably within sales we tend to go towards the personality types of sort of red, yellow type personality types, very very goal orientated, very people orientated, which is exactly what salespeople need to be. On those personality charts, I am like solid blue. I love a spreadsheet. I love kind of looking at that analysis, and so that's just in my role, kind of. But I think that's sort of common in the sort of sales operations area, is that we do think differently, and that sort of diversity of thinking is often what a sales team needs, because you are in that environment where creating relationships, being goal orientated, loving the fact that you've got a quota to go and hit, doesn't necessarily map to someone who sits in the blue. But you need that analytical mind to help think you through the strategy, have a look at the analytics, do all those sorts of things that we do in our field. So yeah, I think we're somewhat of a rare breed. I mean, you haven't had too many
but
people talking about these sorts.
We've all got blind spots, and I think that the key thing is that having somebody that plugs those gaps in your knowledge and your understanding is really important. And I can imagine nothing worse than being stuck in a room full of people like me. So because part of the joy of doing stuff is having differences of opinion and different perspectives on things, because that's how we all learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Paul, I mean, what a fascinating chat. We need to make these things longer, really. That's the long and the short of it.
I really enjoyed it. It's gone quickly.
Yeah, well, they normally do, I hope. So I hope you will come back and be a guest again for us, because this is all stuff that we need to explore more. So to everybody in the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your comments, and everyone that's subsequently going to be watching, thank you very much as well. If you would like to be a guest, please scan the QR code and fill out the form, and we would love to hear from you. So until next time, thank you all very much indeed. It's been great to have you, and great to have Paul on talking,